The wind pushed hard against the old wooden barn, making the rusted hinges cry out in sharp, uneven groans. Dust swirled across the dry ground, and the sun was already slipping behind the hills, painting the sky in deep orange and bruised purple. The ranch, usually quiet and steady, felt tense that evening, as if the land itself was holding its breath. "I'm begging you, hurry up." The voice came from behind the barn, thin and desperate, cutting through the wind like a knife. Daniel Hayes stopped in his tracks. He had been walking back from the stables, his boots heavy with mud, his hands still aching from a long day's work. The ranch was his life, his refuge, and his responsibility. Nothing ever happened here, nothing unexpected, but that voice changed everything. He turned slowly, his heartbeat picking up. For a moment, he thought maybe he'd imagined it. But then it came again. "Please, someone, please." It was a woman. Daniel moved faster now, rounding the corner of the barn. The shadows were longer back there, the sunlight barely reaching past the fence line. His eyes scanned the space, the old tractor, the empty water trough, the stacks of hay. And then he saw her. She was on her knees in the dirt, her hands trembling, her face streaked with dust and tears. Her clothes were torn at the sleeves, and her hair clung to her face in tangled strands. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and desperate. "Help me," she whispered. "Please, he's coming back." Daniel took a step closer, his jaw tightening. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low but steady. "I ran," she said quickly, her words stumbling over each other. "I ran as far as I could. I saw your ranch. I thought maybe you could help." Daniel glanced out toward the long dirt road that led to the highway. No cars, no movement, just silence and wind. "Who's coming back?" he asked. Before she could answer, the distant rumble of an engine reached them. The woman flinched violently, turning her head toward the road. "That's him," she whispered. "He found me." Daniel's hands curled into fists. "Get up," he said firmly. She tried, but her legs shook so badly she nearly fell again. Daniel reached out and grabbed her arm, pulling her to her feet. She was lighter than he expected, fragile, like she hadn't eaten in days. "Inside the barn," he said. "Quick." He led her through the large sliding doors, the wood scraping loudly as he shoved them open. The air inside was thick with the smell of hay and horses. The animals shifted nervously in their stalls, sensing something was wrong. He guided her toward the back, behind a stack of old feed sacks. "Stay here," he said. "Don't make a sound." Her fingers caught his sleeve as he turned to leave. "Please don't let him take me," she said, her voice breaking. Daniel looked down at her. There was real fear in her eyes, not panic, not confusion. Fear, the kind that came from knowing exactly what someone was capable of. "I won't," he said. Then he turned and walked back outside. The engine grew louder, closer. A black pickup truck rolled into view, dust kicking up behind it. It stopped hard near the front gate. A man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face like stone. His eyes scanned the ranch slowly, calculating, cold. He shut the truck door with a heavy slam and began walking forward. Daniel met him halfway. "Evening," Daniel said, his voice calm. The stranger stopped a few feet away. "You seen a woman come through here?" the man asked. Daniel crossed his arms. "Nope." The man studied him, his gaze sharp. "She's about this tall," he said, gesturing. "Brown hair. Looks like she's been running." Daniel shook his head. "Haven't seen anyone." The man stepped closer. "Mind if I take a look around?" Daniel didn't answer right away. The wind howled across the open field behind them. "This is private land," Daniel finally said. The man's lips pressed into a thin line. "She stole something from me," he said. "I just want what's mine." Daniel felt something twist in his stomach. "Doesn't sound like my problem." The man's expression darkened. "You sure about that?" For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence stretched tight between them. Then the man started toward the barn. Daniel stepped in front of him. "I said no." The man's hand moved suddenly, not to push Daniel, but to reach into his jacket. Daniel reacted without thinking. He grabbed the man's arm, twisting it hard. There was a sharp cry of pain as something metal clattered to the ground. A knife. The rancher's heart pounded in his ears. The stranger struggled, trying to pull free, but Daniel held on. Years of hard work had made him stronger than he looked. "You bring a weapon onto my land," Daniel said, his voice low and dangerous. The man's eyes burned with anger. "She belongs to me," he snarled. Something inside Daniel snapped. Without another word, he shoved the man back hard. The stranger stumbled, losing his balance and falling into the dirt. Before he could get up, Daniel grabbed the heavy rope tied to the fence post and pulled it loose. "What are you doing?" the man shouted, trying to scramble away. Daniel didn't answer. He moved fast, grabbing the man's wrists and forcing them behind his back. The stranger fought, kicking and cursing, but Daniel's grip didn't loosen. In seconds, the rope was wrapped tight, binding his arms. "You can't do this," the man yelled. "You don't even know who she is." Daniel stood over him, breathing hard. "I know enough." The man glared up at him, fury and fear mixing in his eyes. "This isn't over," he said. Daniel dragged him toward the fence and tied the rope around one of the thick wooden posts, securing him tight. The man struggled, but the knots held firm. The wind grew louder again, rattling the barn doors. Daniel turned and walked back inside. The woman was still behind the sacks, her hands clutched tightly together. When she saw him, she stood quickly. "Is he gone?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. "No," he said, "but he's not going anywhere." Her shoulders sagged, relief and fear fighting across her face. "You tied him up?" she asked. Daniel nodded. For a moment, she just stared at him. Then her knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, sobbing. Daniel stood there, unsure what to do. He wasn't used to this. He was used to quiet days, to horses and fences and long stretches of silence. Not this, not fear. After a moment, he stepped closer and handed her his canteen. "Drink," he said gently. She took it with shaking hands. "Thank you," she whispered. Outside, the man shouted again, his voice carried by the wind. Daniel looked toward the barn doors, his face hardening. He had taken a step closer to trouble than he ever had in his life. And what he'd done, tying a man up, forcing him into the dirt, refusing to let him leave, it wasn't something he ever imagined himself capable of. But as he listened to the woman's quiet sobs and the anger of the man outside, he knew one thing. The night settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket, thick and suffocating. The last light of the sun had disappeared behind the distant hills, leaving only a thin silver glow from the rising moon. The wind had calmed, but the silence felt heavier now, deeper, as if something was waiting. Inside the barn, the lantern flickered softly, casting long shadows across the wooden walls. The horses shifted nervously in their stalls, their hooves scraping against the floor. They could sense tension. Animals always could. Daniel stood near the door, listening. Outside, the man was still tied to the fence post. His shouting had stopped, but that almost made it worse. The quiet meant he was thinking. Behind the stack of feed sacks, the woman sat wrapped in an old blanket Daniel had given her. Her hands were still shaking, though she tried to hide it. She kept glancing toward the barn door, like she expected it to burst open at any moment. Daniel finally turned toward her. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, as if even that felt dangerous. "Elena," she said softly. Daniel nodded once. "I'm Daniel." She looked at him for a long moment, studying his face, trying to understand whether she was truly safe. Then her eyes filled with tears again. "I thought he was going to catch me," she whispered. Daniel didn't respond right away. He leaned against the wooden beam, his arms folded. "Who is he?" he asked. Elena swallowed hard. "My husband." The word hit the air like a stone dropping into water. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You ran from your husband." She nodded slowly, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "He wasn't always like this," she said, her voice distant. "When we first met, he was kind. Quiet. He used to bring me flowers from the side of the road. Said they reminded him of me." Daniel stayed silent. "But after we got married, things changed." Her hands gripped the blanket. He started getting angry over small things. Then the anger got worse. Outside, a faint rustling sound came from the direction of the fence. Daniel straightened slightly, listening, but it stopped just as quickly. Inside again, Elena continued. "At first it was yelling," she said. "Then it was breaking things. Then, her voice cracked. Daniel didn't push her to finish. "I tried to leave once before," she said. "He found me before I even reached the bus station." Daniel's hands curled slowly into fists. "What did he do?" he asked quietly. Elena looked down at the dirt floor. "He made sure I never tried again." Silence filled the barn. Only the soft breathing of the horses and the distant creak of wood could be heard. Daniel turned and walked to the barn door. He opened it slightly and looked outside. The man was still there, tied to the post. His head was lowered, his body slumped, but Daniel could tell he wasn't asleep. He was watching, waiting. Daniel stepped outside, closing the barn door behind him. The moonlight cast a pale glow over the ranch, lighting the dust like silver mist. He walked slowly toward the fence. The man lifted his head as Daniel approached. "You think you're a hero," the man said, his voice hoarse but sharp. Daniel stopped a few feet away. "I think you need to leave," Daniel said. The man let out a dry laugh. "She's my wife." Daniel didn't respond. "You don't know what she's done," the man continued. "You don't know what she took from me." "She's not a thing," Daniel said quietly. The man's eyes flashed with anger. "She belongs with me." Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. "No," he said, "she doesn't." For a moment, the man just stared at him. Then his expression shifted, turning almost calm. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You don't know who I am." Daniel stepped closer. "And you don't know who I am either." The man leaned back against the post, the rope tight around his wrists. "You going to keep me tied here all night?" he asked. Daniel didn't answer. The truth was, he didn't know what he was going to do. He had never been in a situation like this. He was a rancher. He fixed fences. He fed animals. He minded his own business. But now there was a man tied to his fence and a terrified woman hiding in his barn. And everything felt like it was balancing on the edge of something dangerous. A sudden sound broke the silence. The crunch of tires on gravel. Daniel turned sharply toward the road. Headlights appeared in the distance. The tied man's lips curled into a slow smile. "Looks like they found me," he said. Daniel's heart started pounding. The headlights grew brighter, closer, until a second truck rolled into view and stopped just outside the gate. Two more men stepped out. They looked around, spotting Daniel first, then the man tied to the post. "What the hell happened?" one of them shouted. Daniel stood still, his body tense. "Untie him," the second man yelled, already moving forward. Daniel stepped in front of them. "Stop." They froze. "Who are you?" the first man asked. "His friends," the second said coldly. "Now move." Daniel didn't move. Behind him, the tied man began to laugh softly. "See," he called out, "I told you this wasn't over." The two newcomers stepped closer, their faces hard. "You've got no right to hold him like this," one said. Daniel's mind raced. 3 men now, and Elena was inside, scared and alone. He couldn't let them reach her. "He came onto my land with a knife," Daniel said. The men exchanged a glance. "Untie him," the first one repeated. "We'll take him and go." Daniel shook his head. "No." The air grew thick with tension. The second man stepped even closer. "You don't understand who you're messing with." Daniel's voice was low but steady. "I understand enough." For a moment, no one moved. Then the tied man spoke again. "She's in the barn, isn't she?" Daniel's stomach dropped. The two men looked toward the barn doors. Without thinking, Daniel stepped back, blocking their line of sight. "Stay away from there," he said. The first man smirked. "That answers that." They started forward, and in that moment, Daniel knew something terrible was about to happen. He moved before they could take another step. He grabbed the thick wooden handle of a nearby shovel and held it tight in his hands. "Don't," he warned, but they kept coming. The wind picked up again, carrying dust across the yard as the tension snapped tight like a wire ready to break. Inside the barn, Elena heard the shouting. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, her breathing fast and shallow. She knew that voice. She knew those footsteps. Tears rolled down her face as fear swallowed her whole. Outside, under the cold moonlight, Daniel stood alone between the barn and the men walking toward it. And for the first time in years, he felt something inside him turn dark. Because he realized he wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was preparing to fight.